What happens when a tourist decides to push a royal guard past his breaking point? At Buckingham Palace, one visitor thought he could turn the Queen's Guard into his personal source of entertainment. But in just moments, the guard's reaction sent shockwaves through the entire crowd. And what happened next was caught on camera for the whole world to see. This wasn't just a minor outburst. It was a powerful reminder of who these soldiers really are and why they demand respect. Stick around, because once you see how it unfolded, you'll never look at the royal guards the same way again. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and comment below to tell us which country you're watching from. On a bright afternoon in London, the air outside Buckingham Palace buzzed with excitement. The palace gates, iconic and glistening in the sunlight, were lined with curious tourists eager to capture a glimpse of the royal guard in action. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, and children pressed their faces against the black and gold bars of the gates. For many visitors, this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, standing at the very heart of Britain's royal tradition. The royal guards, dressed in their unmistakable scarlet tunics and tall bearskin hats, stood like statues. Their stillness seemed almost otherworldly, a living symbol of discipline and tradition. For some, this stoicism inspired deep respect. For others, it sparked curiosity, even mischief. After all, how could these men stay so serious when the whole world seemed determined to distract them? Among the crowd that day, one tourist stood out. Unlike the others who snapped photos and admired from a safe distance, this man carried himself with a smug kind of confidence. He wasn't just here to watch. He wanted to make the show his own. With his friends egging him on and phones ready to capture his antics, he decided to test the limits of the royal guard's patience. At first, his actions seemed small. He mimicked the guard's rigid posture, raising his arms and trying to freeze like a statue. People around laughed softly, finding it harmless entertainment. He leaned closer, pulling exaggerated faces and waving inches away from the guard's expressionless face. The guard, as expected, didn't flinch. His eyes remained forward, his hands firmly gripping his rifle, his stance perfectly squared. But the tourist didn't stop there. Emboldened by the lack of reaction, he decided to push further. He stepped closer, breaking the invisible barrier of personal space that most visitors instinctively respected. Some onlookers frowned, sensing trouble. A mother nearby pulled her child back, whispering that this wasn't a game. But the tourist grinned wider, enjoying the attention. Then came the moment that set everything into motion. The guard shifted slightly as the tourist edged near his path, preparing to block his ceremonial march. For those who knew the rules, this was a dangerous move. Guards are trained to continue their duty no matter who stands in their way. To obstruct them is not only disrespectful but risky. Yet the tourist either didn't know or didn't care. The crowd's energy shifted. What had started as playful curiosity now hung in suspense. People held their breath, waiting to see how far this man would go, and how long the guard would tolerate it. Little did the tourist realize. He was seconds away from pushing things too far. The tension outside Buckingham Palace was building. What had started as a harmless act of tourist bravado was quickly turning into something far more serious. The man at the center of it all still grinned, clearly enjoying the attention of the crowd. With every second that passed, more phones were raised, lenses zoomed in, and whispers of anticipation rippled through the bystanders. Everyone could sense it. Something was about to happen. At first, the tourist's antics were little more than mockery. He made exaggerated faces in front of the guard, raising his eyebrows and puffing out his chest as though imitating the soldier's rigid bearing. A few tourists laughed nervously, but others grew visibly uncomfortable. They had come to admire a symbol of tradition, not to witness a stunt. Yet the man, oblivious to the growing unease, seemed determined to push the boundaries. He began stepping side to side, deliberately weaving closer into the guard's line of movement. The guard's eyes, locked forward in that timeless stare, gave no hint of recognition. But those who knew even a little about the royal guards understood the danger in what the tourist was doing. Their rifles aren't ceremonial props. They are fully functional weapons, and the men who wield them are trained soldiers, not street performers. To interfere with their duties is to invite consequences. Still, the tourist pressed on. He reached out a hand, not quite touching but hovering just inches from the guard's shoulder, as if daring him to react. His friends chuckled and urged him on. "Go on, see if he moves," one whispered loudly, loud enough for others in the crowd to hear. Some shook their heads, muttering under their breath that this wasn't a smart idea. A few even pulled out their phones, sensing they might capture something extraordinary. And then, the boldest move yet, the tourist stepped directly into the guard's path, planting himself squarely in front of the soldier during his ceremonial march. The guard's boots struck the ground with sharp precision, echoing against the stone forecourt. The crowd went silent, the only sound the rhythmic stomp of the guard drawing closer. Every step brought the moment closer to breaking point. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though the guard might simply stop, or that the tourist might leap out of the way at the last second. But neither happened. The guard continued forward, unflinching, unwavering, his discipline radiating like steel. The tourist, emboldened, puffed out his chest as though he were part of some grand show. Then it happened. In one thunderous motion, the guard stomped forward with a power that rattled the ground, his voice exploding into the air. "Make way!" The shout cut through the courtyard like a cannon blast. Tourists gasped, some recoiling instinctively, while others froze in stunned silence. The tourist's grin vanished instantly, replaced by wide-eyed shock. He stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance, his face drained of color. The rifles of the guards are not just for show, and their authority is absolute in the moment of duty. This display wasn't violence. It was controlled, precise, and calculated. A warning. A reminder that these men are not actors in a street performance, but guardians of royal tradition and national security. The crowd erupted, some murmuring in awe, others raising their phones higher to capture the unfolding drama. What seconds earlier had seemed like harmless fun now felt like a living history lesson, one with very real consequences. For the tourist, however, the reality had finally set in. He had gone too far, and the guard had snapped in the only way his discipline allowed. The air outside Buckingham Palace had shifted from casual amusement to sheer tension in an instant. The guard's thunderous stomp and booming command had shattered the illusion that this was some harmless game. The sound of his voice, sharp, commanding, and absolute, echoed off the palace walls, reverberating through the crowd like a warning shot. The tourist who had been so bold only moments before now looked utterly stunned. His smirk had vanished, replaced with wide, darting eyes as he realized that this was no longer a playful exchange. He stumbled backward, raising his hands slightly as though to shield himself from the weight of the soldier's authority. The guard had not touched him, but the force of that voice alone was enough to bring him crashing back to reality. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A young boy near the front tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Is he in trouble?" While others simply stared in awe. For some, this was a once-in-a-lifetime glimpse into the uncompromising discipline of the royal guards. For others, it was a sobering reminder that these soldiers were not props or performers. They were living embodiments of tradition, order, and authority, and they had limits. The guard, however, did not linger on the moment. His training was clear: respond, then resume. After delivering his warning, he immediately snapped back into formation. His rifle rested firmly against his shoulder, his gaze returned to its forward stare, and his march continued as though nothing had happened. To him, the incident was not a spectacle. It was simply duty. But to the hundreds of onlookers who had witnessed it, the incident was unforgettable. Tourists lowered their phones only to immediately raise them again, ensuring they had captured the entire exchange. Social media accounts were already buzzing as people typed out captions and hit record to narrate what they had just seen. Within hours, the footage would travel far beyond the palace gates, sparking debates across continents. For the tourist, humiliation replaced bravado. He had come seeking laughs, perhaps hoping to create a funny video to share online. Instead, he had been the center of a lesson in discipline and authority, broadcast to a global audience. His friends, who had cheered him on earlier, now shifted uncomfortably, unsure of whether to laugh or quietly move on. What stood out most about the guard's reaction was its balance. He had not lashed out physically, nor had he broken character in a way that diminished his role. Instead, his response had been precise, a display of authority honed through centuries of tradition and strict training. It was a demonstration of how discipline does not mean weakness, and silence does not mean submission. The crowd, which moments earlier had been laughing and joking, now fell into a kind of reverent hush. Some clapped quietly, almost as if applauding the guard's composure and strength. Others whispered about how close the tourist had come to being escorted away by security or worse. For those who understood the gravity of the situation, the guard's restraint was remarkable. In the aftermath of that single explosive reaction, the atmosphere outside the palace changed. Tourists kept a wider berth, watching the guards with renewed respect. Parents explained to their children that these men weren't actors, but soldiers carrying real weapons, ready to act if duty demanded it. What had once seemed like a backdrop for photos had been transformed into a living reminder of military discipline and national pride. And though the guard himself resumed his post without another glance, his reaction lived on in the minds and cameras of everyone present. The moment would not just fade away. It was now a piece of viral history, destined to be replayed, debated, and remembered. The palace forecourt, which only minutes earlier had been filled with the casual buzz of tourists, now pulsed with a new kind of energy. People looked at one another with wide eyes, some whispering excitedly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The royal guard's sudden outburst had electrified the atmosphere, and no one could deny that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. For the onlookers, the reaction was split. A handful of people chuckled nervously, treating the incident as if it were the climax of a show they hadn't expected to see. They replayed the moment in their minds, the stomp, the shout, the tourists' stunned retreat, and laughed at the sheer audacity of it all. But for many others, the mood was more serious. Parents leaned down to their children and explained softly that what they had just seen was not entertainment, but a soldier doing his job. "They're not clowns," one father muttered, still recording with his phone. "They're protecting the palace." The lesson was clear. The guards were not there for amusement. They were there to stand as living symbols of discipline and defense. Phones were everywhere, raised high above the crowd. The moment had been captured from dozens of angles, ensuring that the story would not remain confined to Buckingham Palace. Within minutes, clips were uploaded to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, each with captions designed to draw in millions of viewers. "Guard finally snaps at tourist," read one title. "Tourist learns the hard way," read another. By the time the tourist himself slunk back into the crowd, his moment of glory had already spun out of his control. The internet thrives on moments like these, short bursts of drama, conflict, and authority that strike a nerve across cultures. And this clip had all the ingredients of virality: suspense, shock, and the satisfying balance of justice delivered instantly. As the hours passed, the video spread like wildfire. People across the world debated the scene passionately. Some defended the tourist, saying he was just having fun and didn't deserve to be embarrassed so harshly. Others, however, applauded the guard's discipline, insisting that mocking soldiers is never acceptable. The divide fueled comments, shares, and heated discussions that only made the clip more popular. Television outlets soon picked it up, adding to the momentum. News anchors replayed the video with commentary, framing it as part of the larger conversation about respect for traditions and cultural boundaries. "This isn't the first time a tourist has pushed a guard too far," one commentator noted. "But every time it happens, we're reminded that the line between entertainment and disrespect is thinner than people realize." Meanwhile, for those who had been standing in the crowd that day, the story became something they would tell for years. "I was there when it happened," one woman later said in a viral interview. The air went silent when he shouted. "You could feel the power of it." First-hand accounts only added more layers to the moment, making it not just a viral video, but a shared cultural experience. What made the incident resonate so strongly wasn't simply the guard's reaction, but what it symbolized: a defense of discipline in an age where everything is filmed, mocked, and turned into content. To see a soldier refuse to be treated like a prop reminded millions that some traditions demand respect, no matter how entertaining a distraction might seem. And so, what began as a tourist's joke ended as a worldwide conversation, proof that even in a crowd full of flashing cameras, one soldier's command can silence the noise and command respect. To someone watching from the outside, the Royal Guard's reaction might have seemed sudden, even extreme. But in truth, every stomp, every shout, and every gesture was rooted in centuries of tradition and strict military training. To understand why the Guard finally snapped that day, we need to look deeper into who these soldiers are, the rules they follow, and the weight of the duty they carry. The Queen's Guard, now known more broadly as the King's Guard, aren't actors in a performance. They are fully trained soldiers, drawn from the most prestigious regiments of the British Army. When they stand in front of Buckingham Palace, they aren't simply standing for show. They are protecting one of the most important royal residences in the world. Though tourists may see their bright scarlet tunics and tall bearskin hats as ceremonial, their presence is both symbolic and functional. The Guard represents centuries of British history, discipline, and military precision, but they also remain on active duty. Their rifles are very real, their discipline unwavering, and their authority backed by law. The Guards are trained to remain stoic under almost any circumstance. People shout in their faces, wave their hands, make silly dances, or try to distract them for photos. For hours at a time, these soldiers endure the noise, the heat, the heckling, and the constant pressure without breaking. But there is a line. When that line is crossed, when someone threatens their personal space, obstructs their march, or behaves in a way that could compromise security, the Guard is trained to act. Their reactions are not random bursts of anger. They are deliberate, measured responses designed to reassert authority and maintain order. The tourist that day had gone far beyond acceptable behavior. By stepping directly into the Guard's path and refusing to move, he created a disruption that demanded immediate correction. The stomp and thunderous shout of, "Make way!" were not improvised. They were precisely the kind of controlled escalation taught during Guard training. The roots of this discipline stretch back centuries. The Household Division, which supplies the Guards, has a reputation for unmatched precision and composure. Their stoicism isn't just a military tactic. It's a tradition woven into the fabric of British identity. Over the years, countless tourists have tried to make Guards laugh, speak, or break their rigid composure. Most Guards simply ignore the provocations, but there have always been moments, captured in grainy photographs and shaky videos, where a Guard has raised his voice, drawn his sword, or leveled his rifle to remind people of the seriousness of their post. Each incident, while rare, reinforces the same message. These men are not entertainers, and their patience is not infinite. One of the most misunderstood aspects of the Royal Guards is their weaponry. The rifles they carry, often SA-80s, are not empty. They are functional, loaded, and ready if needed. These are not stage props. They are tools of defense. The Guards are soldiers first, ceremonial figures second. This means that when a Guard reacts, it isn't theater. It's a real display of authority backed by military training and protocol. Tourists may laugh or gasp, but behind the spectacle lies the full weight of Britain's military presence, standing silently in front of one of its most iconic landmarks. This wasn't the first time a Guard had to snap. In the past, there have been clips of Guards pushing back unruly tourists, stomping forward to clear paths, or shouting in booming voices to maintain their space. One famous video shows a Guard shoving a man who tried to block his march. Another captures a Guard bellowing at a tourist who dared to grab at his uniform. These moments, while shocking to the uninitiated, are always rooted in the same principle. Order must be preserved. The Guard isn't reacting out of personal anger, but out of duty. His voice isn't raised to humiliate, but to enforce boundaries that tourists sometimes forget exist. So why did the Guard snap so dramatically on this particular day? Because the tourist crossed multiple lines at once. He mocked the Guard's posture, stepped into his personal space, and ultimately blocked his ceremonial march. Each offense on its own might have been tolerated. Combined, they demanded a response. The Guard's booming voice and forward stomp weren't a breakdown of discipline. They were the very definition of it. Controlled, powerful, and effective. In seconds, order was restored. The tourist was put back in his place, and the dignity of the guard's post was reasserted. The moment the guard snapped didn't end when the tourist backed away in shock. In fact, that was just the beginning of the story. Because within hours, the video of the incident spread across social media platforms like wildfire. Clips of the booming shout, the powerful stomp, and the stunned reaction of the tourist were replayed again and again. Some people uploaded the raw footage, others turned it into short edits with dramatic music, and countless viewers shared their own opinions in comment sections. What might have been just another tense encounter in front of Buckingham Palace suddenly became a global talking point. On one side, millions of viewers praised the guard. They admired his discipline, his authority, and his ability to command respect in just a few seconds. "That's what happens when you mess with tradition," one viewer wrote. Another chimed in, "The guard didn't lose his cool. He showed exactly why no one should take them lightly." Others pointed out that the guard's response was not just about respect, but about safety. In today's world, when security threats are taken very seriously, any breach of distance or protocol could escalate into something far more dangerous. The guard acted to neutralize a disruption before it became a problem, and for many that was the mark of professionalism, but not everyone saw it that way. Some argued the guard's reaction was too harsh, suggesting that tourists might not understand the seriousness of the guard's role. "It's just a palace guard," one critic wrote. "No need to scare people." Others went further, saying the tradition itself feels outdated in the modern era of casual tourism. This clash of perspectives turned a short clip into a debate about history, authority, and cultural differences. The incident didn't just live on social media. Soon, online news outlets began picking up the story. Headlines like, "Royal Guard loses patience with tourist," or "Tourist gets lesson in respect outside Buckingham Palace," grabbed attention worldwide. Television stations replayed the video in slow motion, dissecting every move, while commentators debated whether the guard was too strict or simply doing his duty. In many ways, the coverage amplified what the guard himself had demonstrated in those few seconds, that his presence isn't for show. Suddenly, millions of people who had never thought twice about the guards began discussing their purpose, their training, and their significance to British heritage. Perhaps the biggest conversation sparked by the video centered on respect. Should tourists be expected to treat the guards with the same seriousness as police officers or soldiers in the field? Or should allowances be made because tourists see them as part of a ceremonial attraction? Supporters of the guard argued that respect should always come first. After all, the uniform represents centuries of service and sacrifice. Allowing tourists to treat the guards like amusement park characters would erode that symbolism. Critics, however, felt that the guard's stoicism invites curiosity, and that tourists shouldn't be punished for testing boundaries. This debate revealed an important truth. While the guards are deeply respected in the UK, not everyone around the world understands their cultural importance. For some, they're living symbols of national pride. For others, they're an Instagram opportunity. Ironically, the tourist who thought he was making a joke ended up creating a lesson in global awareness. His disrespect sparked conversations about discipline, tradition, and cultural understanding. Many viewers admitted they had no idea how strict the guards were until they saw the clip. For some, the video was enough to change their perspective entirely. "If I ever visit, I'm not going anywhere near them," one commenter joked. Others admitted they'd always wanted to try making a guard laugh, but after watching the video, they'd think twice. What the incident proved most of all was that the guards are far more than photo props. They are living symbols of a nation's history and military pride. And when pushed too far, they will remind the world of that fact. The ripple effect of that single confrontation outside Buckingham Palace carried far beyond the forecourt gates. What began as a moment of tension between one disrespectful tourist and a royal guard became a powerful reminder of why certain traditions endure and why the role of the guards is so much more than a ceremonial display. In the weeks after the video went viral, conversations continued across online platforms, news outlets, and even academic discussions about the place of ceremony in modern society. Some argued that the guards' discipline served as a vital link to Britain's heritage, a living embodiment of history that connected the present to centuries of monarchy and military tradition. Others questioned whether maintaining such rigid rules in the age of smartphones and casual tourism was still practical. Yet despite the debates, one truth stood out above all. The guards had once again proven that their authority was not symbolic, but real. For the royal guard involved in the incident, his actions reflected what every soldier in his position is trained for: to defend dignity, enforce order, and remind the public that discipline and respect form the foundation of military service. He did not seek recognition, nor did he break character for fame. He simply followed his training, asserting control when a line was crossed, and then returning to his stoic stance as if nothing had happened. In doing so, he exemplified the very values that generations of guards before him had embodied. The tourist, on the other hand, became a cautionary tale. He may have thought his prank would earn laughs or likes on social media, but instead it turned him into the subject of global scrutiny. His face of shock became a symbol of what happens when curiosity collides with discipline. For many future visitors to Buckingham Palace, that clip served as a warning. The guards are not performers waiting to be entertained. They are soldiers, entrusted with a responsibility. And anyone who forgets that does so at their own risk. What made the incident so compelling wasn't just the guards' reaction, but the universal lesson it carried. Across cultures, respect for tradition, authority, and symbols of national pride is something almost every country understands. By disregarding those boundaries, the tourist highlighted the very thing he failed to appreciate: that certain roles, uniforms, and institutions deserve recognition, no matter how unusual or unfamiliar they may seem to outsiders. The long-term legacy of the viral moment was twofold. For the royal guards, it reinforced their global image as unshakable figures of discipline, soldiers who will never falter in their duties, no matter the distraction. For the public, it was a chance to rethink how they approached cultural landmarks and the people who represent them. What might look like a light-hearted game to one person could be a deep insult to centuries of tradition. As the video continued to circulate, racking up millions of views across platforms, it became more than just entertainment. It became a teaching moment. Parents showed it to their children as a lesson in respect. Tourists planning trips to London added, "Don't touch the guards," to their personal rules. Even military personnel from other countries pointed to the incident as an example of how discipline and training hold firm in the face of provocation. In the end, the story of the royal guard who snapped after a tourist went too far was not just about one man's reaction, but about the enduring weight of history, the clash between modern behavior and timeless tradition, and the universal need to show respect where it is due. The slap of the guard's voice and the stomp of his foot echoed far beyond Buckingham Palace, reminding the world that behind the uniform is not a statue or performer, but a soldier, one who will defend his duty without hesitation. And as with so many of these moments, the closing lesson is simple yet profound. Respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost everything.